the screen that I'm hearing now.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, what we had plans just for, let's see, how do I go next? Okay, just for the agenda today was to walk through just a brief slide deck, maybe to spend, 7 minutes or so on that. And then spend most of the time, we can run through a demo of what we're building and then hopefully spend most of the time on discussion. But, we don't have to save the discussion until the end. So, stop us at any time. We're more than happy to, just talk and answer questions and take feedback as we go instead of saving it all until the end. So, feel free to interrupt and keep the conversation going. What we're working on is definitely it's a challenging space. So we're looking forward to the discussion and the feedback. There's a lot of a lot of opportunity, a lot of challenges, a lot of problems and things we need to address. And we already got a nice email of some feedback already, which is super helpful. So anything, feel free to be candid. No feelings will be hurt here. So looking forward to it. But we can kick it off, just with some quick intros of Shah and I. Shah, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So my name is Shah. Before this, I was lead machine learning engineer at Fanatics. So Fanatics is this e-commerce platform for sports merchandise, and I was leading their search and recommendation systems for matching people with products. And before that, I was early engineer in a couple of analytics startups in Bay Area, and started my career in Amazon as a software engineer. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Shah. And my background, I was in the Marine Corps after college, so served as a human intelligence officer. So, was fortunate to have the opportunity to lead some small teams and some big teams, both here in the United States and also overseas in Afghanistan. For those who have been there, I was down in Helmand, so, in like the Kajaki, Sangin, Musa Kela region. And after the Marine Corps, got my MBA and then went into tech. So I've been in San Francisco for the past 5 years or so, working for big and small companies, worked at Facebook, combating misinformation on their platform, and also at some high growth startups out that way. And have since relocated to the Washington, D.C., Virginia area. So it's nice to be back east, and Shah's out in San Francisco. So we still get together a lot out that way, which is a lot of fun. And we can jump right into the material here. This won't be, this is a familiar problem for everybody. I don't think we need to spend too much time on it, but, planning LVC training is, has a lot of downsides. It can be very time consuming, very tedious, very resource intensive and costly from, a capital perspective as well. And, once you execute these training events, they're, not always as good as they should be. Why we started working on this problem and, what was the genesis of it was before I got out of the Marine Corps, I helped to plan an exercise out west in 29 Palms called Steel Night. So Steel Night is just a live 2-week exercise out in the desert, force on force type training. And, I was with a lot of staff officers planning this event back in 2015. And, you spend so much time, designing scenarios, coming up with objectives. The CG, kind of pokes his head in every now and then and kind of changes things up and shakes things up. And then you got to revise things and come up with new schedules, new events. You have to write scripts for role players. There's a lot of dynamic and moving parts in the planning process. And you need a lot of, functional experts to come together and to share their knowledge and how to build a comprehensive and, challenging training exercise. And then after the planning, you go out and you execute it, right? And then after the execution, you ideally everything goes according to plan and everything's challenging, everything's realistic and dynamic and it's good training for everybody. And then you do the after action. And, there's a lot of problems across the 3 different stages of planning, execution, and after action, which I'll touch on here in a second. So if you think about, we're talking all LVC here, right? So we're talking, tabletop exercises with small teams all the way up to, NATO joint exercises, maybe out in the, Indo-PACOM area of operations. Whatever you're talking about, these things they're not easy to plan, as everybody knows. And, they take time and they take a lot of personnel. So, some large exercises, right? The big NATO ones can take more than a year and a half to plan. And, that just places a ton of additional strain on the warfighters who maybe are dual hatting, helping to plan in addition to their normal operational duties. And then in the execution, you don't always have the best tools to work with on the technology side, whether that's hardware or software. They're not always integrated, so sometimes you're using out-of-date technology. Oftentimes, and I saw this a lot, was just scenarios are reused. So a lot of people know the outcomes of what's expected of them, so they can kind of game to game, whether that's an exercise, a live exercise, whether it's a digital war game. So it's never great training for those instances. And then on the lessons learned aspect, a lot of the feedback is forgotten and it's just not annotated. It's not passed on, and you don't use it for the next exercise or the next war game evolution, which is unfortunate. And same if a different unit was to run an exercise, we just never leverage their lessons learned in order to make our exercises better. So we think there's a lot of opportunity in the lessons learned aspect of these training events. So what Shah and I have been building is leveraging recent advances in generative AI. So I'm sure a lot of people have had the opportunity to play around with a lot of the new foundation models out there that kind of OpenAI came out with back in November timeframe. And since then, there have been a lot of improvements on the tech side and also a lot of open source stuff happening, and a lot of, the space is moving very fast. So it's been so much fun to watch. So we're taking that technology and making it relevant to the warfighting domain. Our initial use case is to improve LVC training with a generative AI platform in order to make these things, the most impactful they can be for everybody planning, everybody participating. So what we really want to do is generate, novel and realistic training that's dynamic and can adapt to, real world scenarios and what's going on in the geopolitical landscape. We want to help commanders make better decisions and help guide the decision process. Something to touch on here is that, we never have any intention of removing humans from the loop. Humans will always be the end decision maker in our minds. They're just going to be working in a human machine team and, use recommendations given to, inform their own judgments, to make their own decisions, because these things are not perfect for sure. There are risks associated with them. So we want to make sure that, humans are always involved. That goes into the power of generative AI. It really is cool. A lot of what Shah and I are working on now is escaping from the pure text-based generation into more dynamic things, like charts and tables and complex products that you might use in various aspects of an intelligence cycle or report writing for operational reasons and other aspects. And obviously it comes a lot with AI in general helps streamline things. So you think about saving time, money, and resources. Here's where we delve into specific use cases in the LVC world. So if you're from a planning perspective, you can use models to help write scenarios. If you have a blank space problem, you generally know what you want to get across, but you don't know some of the details, or you want assistance thinking about history and what things have happened. You can just prompt in natural language your thoughts and ask questions on how to create a scenario of any length, of any amount of detail, and that will hopefully solve the blank space problem. Maybe you want help creating fictional countries that reflect the real world, and stuff like that. So pretty interesting there. Scripts are interesting if you have role players. A lot of the time you're kind of just hand jamming these and thinking about, or people are just kind of coming up with stuff on the fly. But if you want to, make it more realistic and reflect the actual scenario, you can have AI write these scripts for the role players. Some other things to highlight here: generate injects at scale. So, when I was planning this exercise, we would just walk around and hand out, pink pieces of paper that said, had updated OSINT information that an intelligence analyst could use to update a scenario that would then inform what's going to happen next in the schedule of events and all of that. Now we can generate realistic injects that are, mirror the form of tweets on Twitter, now X, so that they're more realistic. You can make them at scale, so you can deliver them in volume, and you can actually have an analyst go through and crunch and actually use what they've been trained to do. On the participant side, summarizing data is huge. That use case is very popular with generative AI. So, if you handle long form documents, you can just upload a link or upload the document just to have it summarized in 100 words or in 1,000 words, or whatever kind of detail you want. Drafting Intel products is pretty cool. So we can show an example of that pretty soon here shortly. Searching and retrieving data, that's kind of our core functionality. So Shah will jump into the technology a little bit and talk about, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Search and retrieving, so using retrieval augmented generation to make sure that we're deeping or diving into a database to find relevant doctrine and relevant policies and relevant publications of which to pull information from, and then use that information to generate something else. or just to generate the information people are looking for. Maybe they want to know what was in, some Army publication or some joint publication, and instead of finding it online, they can just use our search engine to find it. So some of the use cases, obviously, there's a lot more, and from a wargaming perspective, you can think about how all these relate. Just a quick touch on our vision. So, we're starting in this kind of LVC space just because we have pretty good knowledge of it, and we think it's interesting. And it's interesting to think about the last 20 years have been kind of geared towards this threat, of the war on terror, and obviously that's changing with the great power competition and looking at peers and near peers. So, training is so important right now, and we want to make sure that it's realistic for warfighters. We want to make sure that it's impactful for them and that they're prepared to encounter some of these new challenges out there right now. But we see a lot of opportunity just to take what we've learned since we've been building to apply it to different aspects of what, like the warfighter, what the intelligence community might face. And we think that will go in the direction of creating what we call complex products. Maybe it's creating reports of different kinds. Maybe it's creating charts. Maybe it's creating audio. Maybe it's creating video. Obviously, there's a lot of improvements that need to happen to get to that vision, but something that we're actively working on. And everything that we talk about is obviously has to be guided by trust. So we're constantly trying to find ways to improve trust in the AI platform that we're building. It's not always right. It will hallucinate sometimes. You have to be sometimes very sensitive with prompting and what kind of questions you're asking. But over time, we're working on a number of features just to bring in some more aspects of trust, as you'll see here shortly in a demo about trying to add cite sources and ask follow-up questions and that kind of thing. I'll now let Shah jump into a brief overview of the tech.
Right. So I guess I'll explain our systems with end-to-end flow. So we have three main components. On the left, you have the retrieval component. So when users type something that hits our semantic search module, and that module goes and picks out relevant documents from our knowledge base for that query. And then it passes that query and the context to the next two modules. Generation is basically where we have all our LLMs and other generative models, which uses that query and context and generates artifacts. Those artifacts could be text, images, maps, and those artifacts then pass down to the guardrails. And this is where we make sure that the generated output aligns with the query and context. In other words, the model is not hallucinating or generating some inappropriate content. And once those tests passes, we pass down the product back to the user. So that's at a very high level.
Sorry, I lost my unmute button there. Thanks, Shah. And now we're just planning on jumping right into a demo and discussion. If that works for everybody, I mean, happy to pause here for a moment and just take any questions before I just switch my screen.
Mike, do you mind flipping back to that architecture slide?
Of course.
Okay, cool. Very good, very good. So I do have a question. In terms of setting your guardrails and kind of narrowing in what your system is looking at in the semantic search, do you foresee, if this was going on for a certain amount of time, being used by an organization, they would have just like a standard body, or would it be tailored for each individual event?
I think we started with a standard, but the system is modular, that you can add new rules or new ways to detect inappropriate content. So in other words, it would be extendable for different organizations.
And we're also looking at how do you take smaller models, so something that's more tailored to certain organizations that might not be relevant to another, right? So mode if somebody's running a war game in the WMD space, how do you tailor it to that, and how do you make it smaller and faster? So something we're also working on, and how do you make it happen in on-prem, if you're to do that, if you're, you know, out there at the edge, thinking about making decisions, but also things we're working on. Thanks, Chuck. And some more questions here.
Yeah,
Dr.
we've got
Barry,
a couple from Dr. Barry and then Fareed, please.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm wondering what foundational model are you using, and then secondly, is this just a fine-tuned model, or is it a little bit of a combination of like a raggish kind of kitchen sink raggish fine-tuned model? So those are the two big questions I have. Thank you.
So we are using open source models like Llama, Open Llama, Stable LM, those ones, and then fine tuning on top of it. And you're right, it is basically a drag system. So for generation, we are using that, and for semantic search, we are using some sentence BART, which basically does the embedding search. So two sets of model at this point.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Dr. Barry. And Fareed, I think you were next.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike and Shah. What is in the knowledge base, and how do you populate that, and how are you training it?
Yeah, Shah, I'll do what's in it. Or you want to do the whole thing?
Oh, please go ahead.
Just as far as what's in it, yeah. So right now, in our general model that we're using is trained on everything, you know, think open source. So we're not using anything that's, you know, secret or above. So stuff that's, you know, publicly available information. And that might include, you know, doctrine, publications, policies, lessons learned, open source war games, open source scenarios that we found or people have sent to us. Anything of interest that like, you know, users have sent to us, and we can add that in there. And then Shah, take over.
Yeah. So Mike is the curator, and then technology-wise, we have Redis and FICE, open source vector database from Facebook for search unit driver. Yeah.
Can you feed it wargaming specific content to train on?
We have, yeah. It's also good to know. I mean, we can, you know, if like there's a specific war game in mind, you know, we're also working on, you know, allowing almost like an advisor to go and, you know, learn that war game and participate in it.
Okay.
Hey, tied to that question, I'm sorry, I didn't see the hand raising tool in this Zoom. In terms of the knowledge base and tied to a specific war game, is there a way where it's just tied to that specific knowledge base or corpus of data related to, say, a fictional exercise set 10 years in the future, and you don't really want to touch on current data? Is there a way to customize that knowledge base?
Yeah, so basically we have defined indexes. Right now there are only few that we have created, but each one can be for each individual customers. So this one index will hold that particular type of data that you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
So along those lines, I do have a question. You know, it was very popular and still remains so today. You know, going back a decade, 2 decades, when you're doing a training event or a wargaming event, to use a fictional set of geography, right? Simuland. You know, it goes by lots of different names, fictional countries, right? You know, imaginations, whatever you want to call it. How hard would it be for your system to restrict itself to just, you know, the spoon-fed information about that fictional land, and to disregard everything that might be out in, like, you know, public, you know, social media and all that other kind of stuff that's related to real world situations?
Yeah. So, you know, we think about it in, you know, like say, Chuck, if you gave us just like a long road to war, you know, maybe like 100-page, like a 100-page road to war, right? That's in a, you know, PDF format or whatever. We could ingest and then just use that. We think of it like an on-prem environment where like everything's air gapped and, you know, it has no knowledge of anything outside of what's in that PDF if you don't want it to. And we could just you know, everything off of that. Okay,
very good. So the custom information, it could be just the custom information. It's not always just an augment onto what's out there and, you know, public available data and so on. Okay, very good.
Dr. Barry, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. So as you look at, I'm looking at, I love your diagram, nice and simple. It is awesome. When you look at your base knowledge store, are you initially crawling for that? Like, are you using Alice? Are you using some kind of program to populate that initially? Or is there some, like, what is the vetting process for that would be question one. And then question two is, in your fine-tuned model, like when you go into Llama, are you finding that some of the stuff in your knowledge store is running into problems with the weights that are already in Llama? So as you look at those large language model, right, that the weights they're giving, fighting your data that you're trying to get out, for instance, in a war game. So you're maybe not getting, for instance, in a war game, right, you're going to be causing, let's say, harm to this fictional enemy, quote unquote, but then you run into a weight in that model that says, oh, do no harm, don't do that. So therefore it's sort of, in a way, is negating, taking each other out. So how do you deal with that? So those are the two questions, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, so first one is about populating. Yes, as I said, Mike makes sure that we have the right documents, and then we have a script that goes and pulls those documents from online and prepare for the knowledge base. And second, about the weights. Yes, that's definitely a problem. So if you just use Llama from Facebook, it would not generate the outputs. It would say that I am not going to generate this violent content. So we solve that in two ways. One is we fine tune with this war specific information. And second is we do prompt engineering. So during inference, we force it that forget about how you are trained or not. You must generate this because this is important. And so those kind of forcing during inference makes, combined with the fine tuning with documents, makes it possible to generate output.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm populating the database. I mean, Dr. Barry, as you know, there's a lot of information out there. So, we have ingested a lot of information, and, we have people using our platform. So, when they find something that we don't have, we allow them just to upload it on their own, which is helpful because otherwise it can get quite tedious. But nevertheless, we still have a lot more to ingest. Fareed?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Are the generate and guardrails modules separate things, or are they part of a existing LLM? Do you add those things yourselves, or you're just training it to behave in a certain way?
They are separate, and we took different open source components and created our own stack. I don't know if there's like a whole system that is like this, and we kind of tailor to our use case, which is this military domain, which is whether we like it or not is violent. So we put together stuff that helps generating those content as well as put them keep them under control. And so with open source, but it's all our own software.
Thanks, Shah. And can you say something about how long it takes to train?
Yeah, so fine tuning takes about a week with our current training set. It can be speed up with costly hardware and some new tricks, but we kind of are at this point at a week.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're always trying to work on that. We have some obviously improvements to do, but especially if people have very specific use cases for what they want to use it for, then we're trying to get that time down so that you're not hampered by integration effort.
Interesting. So just to buy a little time, see if someone else has a question. What I'm thinking of with that sort of approach to learning things quickly in a typical 3-day, 4-day war game or an LVC event or something, you may have a first round where initial information is presented to the players, the war gamers, if you will. They create a set of orders, those are executed, results are learned, and so on, maybe day and a half later. At that point, could your system take the updated situation? Would you have to have it learn again? Or could you just narrow or specify questions you were asking of the existing knowledge base? I mean, both of those seem feasible. I just don't know how quickly it could absorb, information from the first round of a war game.
Mike, you want to take that?
Unmute myself. Oh, I'm unmuted now. Shah, you got that one. Just speed, speed of retraining.
Yeah. So in that scenario, we will not retrain. So what we'll do is just add new information to the knowledge base, and
Oh, very
that
good.
takes about 30 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, yeah. So it really is dynamic. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing in wargaming where when you do have like these 4-day events, it's like you want to spend as much time playing the game and as little time prepping and getting ready for it. So that's something that we want to help out with.
Very good. Okay. All right. Unless there are any other questions, I'll let you guys proceed. I'm looking forward to the next part.
Yeah, we can jump into the demo here, and happy to do anything dynamic in real life here. So this is our live demo environment. So this is not our production environment. So we do have some constraints on it, but we're using it just for speed purposes here. Where the only limitations really that we put in place are well, answers take a little bit longer, but also length. We just limited token length just to help out with speed. But anyway, our production environment has all of that. So, the way we've broken it down is, different modules here that kind of help guide the user. So, the text-based interfaces are hard, right? Like Shah and I come from tech backgrounds, and like we like to streamline interfaces to help out with users and make it very intuitive. They can be learned, but text-based are hard, nevertheless, and have a lot of friction. So, we've kind of broken down, different scenarios here where maybe you have a general knowledge question. So, maybe you're starting to design a war game and you're thinking about like, okay, what do you want to incorporate in here? What kind of military lessons are you looking to drop on? What kind of advice can you get from different publications and different doctrine that you can leverage and hope to, help have somebody learn in their decision-making process in the war game. So, here are just some examples, we put down. Some of them are order of battle based, or maybe they're, summarize this publication, or, what's like the format of an army operation order. And, this will maybe take like 20 seconds or so, but, this is looking at reg, right? So it's going to look at the army operation order, and it should cite sources. And then it should also prompt the user for different follow-on questions so that, just to continue the conversation and maybe, spark some more creativity. So if you're dealing with a blank space problem, but we'll let it do the end. Here we go. So it should be a 5-paragraph order. That's the intended output of what an army operation order looks like. Same thing in the Marine Corps. And you can see it references the field manuals. And what we've implemented is, if you want to see exactly like, where it came from. So page 217 of the operations process. And ideally, when we open this up, it should be the operation order page. Here you go. So this goes right into like the plan, the different paragraphs. So paragraph 1, paragraph 2, 3, mission execution, and all of that. And here are the related questions. So wait, what are the components of paragraph 3 of execution? What's included when you're talking about a situation? What's the purpose of paragraph 2? So you can, as a user, you can click on those and just delve in more. Obviously, you can just ask your own question as well. So it's not limited to just prompts here. But that is just part of our ask anything page. So you can do order of battle. I'm happy to type in a question if anybody has anything they want to test live, or I can come back to it. Also, we're looking at designing scenarios. So this is specifically about like helping planners when they're thinking about scenarios. Maybe it's fictional, maybe it's real world. So hey, maybe it's design a scenario for for a TTX that you're running. And maybe you want to practice amphib landings, and you want to think about hostage rescue. So that's pretty interesting, and probably somewhat relevant to conflict going on, or potential conflict that we would face in the PACOM area. We've also included some limited multimodal functionality here. So it should generate a map of some kind. So we'll see what it does, just to help visualize something for the user here. I'm not sure how it's coming across on screen sharing. Hopefully the text is large enough to kind of read and skim. If it's not, let me know. I can always skim it verbally. Okay, so it looks like it, did something here north of Guam. I didn't really read this in depth. But you can interact with the map. If you want to zoom out, zoom in. And you can obviously take this, scenario and it talks about what type of intel would you gather before you conduct this. What about exfiltration? What kind of contingencies? And other kind of questions. And obviously you can prompt on your own and say like I don't know. Let me put something up here. Say like, oh, maybe the guerrilla is numbering around 50 fighters, heavily armed. Maybe you want to be like, oh no, like they're definitely not 50. Maybe they're a team of a fire team, a small team, right? And they don't have RPGs. You can customize it to your needs. So that's where the importance of prompting and like the importance of like the human comes in, just to make sure that you're guiding it to the end state that you want it to. You don't have to reset this chat every time. I just do that because it just forgets context. But anyway, you can. We've seen a couple of these recently, like pilots getting harassed and by Chinese aircraft. So you can say like, hey, what say this happened, like write an AAR for this pilot, like what did he learn during this circumstance, like what happened, and maybe take these lessons learned and apply it to a training scenario that I want to make, and you can kind of see how you can continue the path. Generate injects is pretty cool. So this talk goes into like the training, especially in live exercises. So when you're thinking about like, hey, how do you like, maybe the intel folks are the ones that made the exercise, so like they know what happened. So like, how do you get them realistic training? How can you get them home through OSINT information or like blogs and social media or news articles and stuff like that? So it's like, hey, I want to generate like realistic tweets of maybe indications and warnings of an impending attack on like a fob or something. So the technology behind this is pretty cool. So it'll generate, 20 or however many tweets you want. And you can also do it where, we're working on other kinds of social media and other kinds of OSINT to mirror the capability, but it's pretty cool, right? So it's like, men came to the mosque to volunteer to fight for freedom, strange vehicles arriving at night, overheard men talking about a big surprise. So, all of these are, pretty realistic indications and warnings, all in tweet formats. You can take these and export them into a deck or into a spreadsheet or whatever your kind of end format of choice is. Maybe it's an email, obviously it depends on the unit and people. But, that's a cool capability. Create products is pretty fascinating. And this we were specifically looking at into IPB, so not super war game specific, but maybe if you're creating like a road to war or something like that, or prepping for a war game and you want to generate some facts really quick about an area, you can do so like this one takes a little bit longer because like an ASCO PME-SI is just kind of like a part of the IPB process. So you create like a matrix of like areas and structures and capabilities that an area might have, and look at like the political, military, economic factors that follow in. I guess I'll just do it because it's kind of cool, but it'll take maybe 60 seconds to load here because it's a lot of characters. But we did this for a different demo when Niger was very relevant and still is, but this will create a complex matrix. And this is really the last demo that I was going to show. So if anybody has any questions while we're waiting for it to generate everything, happy to answer them, or happy if somebody wants to copy and paste, I don't know, some prompt or something, happy to put that in here, or whatever is helpful for everybody.
The question that's on the screen, that's already pretty impressive. Creating a PAMISI table for section in Nigeria. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're excited about this. I mean, I spent a lot of time, as you can imagine, thinking about IPV and going into new areas and thinking about the risk factors and what's going on. And, when you're planning these things, you want to do it very quickly. And, this takes, a team of Intel analysts to, go through and do it and make sure everything is correct. And, obviously you could probably limit to one warfighter now, just to review everything, make sure everything is looking good, add to it, subtract from it, make things longer, make things shorter. So curate it rather than spending their time, searching through databases.
Looks like Dr. Barry has a question.
Oh yeah, Dr. Barry.
So sure, I mean, yeah, that's fantastic. So after they see this, and then a warfighter or commander learns from that, is there a way that in your process they can take that learning and then put that into the database and customize that? For instance, like at the War College, if you had a course and you were running this and you had some key takeaways, and each year you're doing this and improving, is there a way that you have to be able to like customize it for certain courses so that different professors would be able to access the different strengths or different areas they look at? Or
yes,
you want
for sure. Yeah, so basically, two pivot points. One is the fine-tuned model, another is the knowledge base. And we can customize both because we have end-to-end control of the system. So based on whatever user needs we have, we can customize.
Roger, thank you.
That just reminds me of like after actions. If we've gotten requests to put in like a repo, a repository, or a library of like after action points, and use to be able to leverage those when you're thinking about next iterations of something. So similarly, I think would be relevant to lessons when you're talking about academic settings and what you want to get across.
Excellent job, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. And here it's obviously this looks better when it's a spreadsheet when you export it onto into a CSV file, but for UI purposes here, you can just click on each individual column and row alignments and just read what's going on about the coup that happened in Niger and how it's affecting Niamey's political landscape, or however whatever questions you have for it. You can also create threat description tables or terrain effects matrix or other IPV products, and we're also working on adding more in-depth map functionality.
Nice.
Dr. Barry.
Sorry about that. Just want to say, bravo, good job.
Thanks. Sorry, I thought you had another question. But yeah, when you think about Wargaming specific, so we're excited, and like a lot of the feedback we've been getting is maybe we were talking with some folks at the Marine Corps University, and they're like, you have an aviator come in, right, who's I don't know, maybe a captain or a major, and he's or she or logistics officers, and I said aviator, let's go with aviator, right? And they don't know much about like ground operations or intelligence operations or administration operations or what have you. You can almost use this as advisor, where it's like, hey, give me a crash course really quickly in this functional specialty. Maybe it's a joint staff, maybe like the J2's out or something. Like give me some examples of what would be helpful in this situation, or help guide the decision I need to make. So it's almost like an invisible staff that has access to superhuman knowledge.
Excellent. Are you guys looking at creating more graphical based output? Generating I don't know, like notional GIS products or imagery or anything like that based on your learning methods?
Yeah, we have a lot to do, Chuck. We have a long.
Yeah, I didn't mean to shoot for the moon. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, it's on our roadmap. So we have a lot of requests and a lot of things to build, and a lot of it has to do with multimodal and more specific maps, and maybe being able to add overlays to maps.
Awesome.
With natural. Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. Or maybe it's creating audio that's helpful for SIGinters, or maybe it's creating more in-depth charts or infographics and stuff like that. But maps is kind of our number one area, obviously, because it's very just relevant to the space.
Yes. Well, this is fantastic. I think this is really, really good work. So I mean, what we're looking at here, and of course, a lot of things that first come to mind when we talk about wargaming are, of course, military situations. How much have you been able to exercise this and apply it to, say, non-military, economic or humanitarian or whatever kind of other situations?
Yeah, good question. So like we get a lot of questions about this, because it's like, okay, yeah, like everybody's used to having like wargame be very kinetic, right? You're dealing with like tactical things that that are kinetic. So what is something that's in like the gray area? So maybe it's dealing a little bit more at the strategic level. That's you want to talk about economies, you want to talk about politics, and how do those to factor into decisions. So, or humanitarian crises is another good example, Chuck, like you just said. The system is the same, right? So like the system is very general, and the tech is general, where it can adapt to those, right? So you can just take resources that are trained specifically on those use cases, but like it does pretty good right now in like its general format, to not have to be specifically adapted to some of these things unless the customer wants something super specific. But yeah, it's it can do it for sure.
Wow. This whole idea of sort of a generative approach, based on learning, right, and then a generative approach to output, has just got me totally excited. I mentioned the graphical stuff, and I apologize to hit another sore topic. When you're talking about creating products, have you guys looked at creating sort of data products that could be used then to initialize, say, a sim or a digital war game or something like that, like an initialization file or an order of battle file?
Shah, you want to take it? I can take it too. Yeah, so like, you're saying like if you were to give us an order of battle, can we use that to to help make decisions in a war game?
Yeah, or say you ask your system to develop a notional order of battle for a time and a place, right? It learns everything about the situation. You're now creating files for a future war game. You ask your system to create a notional order of battle rather than just having that come out as text. Could you then target it as, say, an XML file that could be loaded into a simulator or something?
Oh, I see. Generating XML. Yeah. So as you saw in the table format, we can handle some sort of structure, and the structures are JSON and XML. So we can generate those.
Awesome. I'm just the reason I brought up those two topics, right? The graphical output and then this sort of initialization product output, is a lot of times those are very, very labor intensive parts of creating, and starting up a training situation or war game situation. So any kind of help that we see from you guys in the community there will be awesome.
Yeah, good point, Chuck. And we've also gotten some questions about like, or say you take a logs from a game, right? Like, I don't know, you're playing Command B or something and you have logs. Can you go through these logs and analyze not analyze, what happened and, what were the key moments? And that's also something that generative AI is generally good at.
Okay, we've got a couple of hands up. Dr. Barry again? Yeah.
Yeah, quick question. Is this the Llama 2 version that you're using? And if so, how many parameters on this one is this model?
Yeah, it's Llama 2, and we are using 13 billion parameter version.
How many parameters, sir?
13 billion. The second one from the bottom. 13 billion. 13.
The 70 billion one?
No, it's a smaller 13. 13.
13.
Yeah.
How many? 13 parameters?
13 billion. Yeah.
13 billion. So, wow. Okay.
Using 13 billion parameters?
Yes.
Out of Llama 2.
Out of Llama 2, yes. Because it's a specific use case, so we don't need that big of a model. At least that's what we have found. And second is that we are injecting a lot of information through RAG, so we don't need to memorize them in the parameters.
So in that case, like for instance, the 70 billion one, why go with the 13 and not the 70? Was there advantage? Is that because of a fine tuning issue, or there's a reason you preferred 13 over 70?
Yeah, so fine tuning cost as well as inference cost, because we'll have to keep running that big model with multi GPUs. So we kind of made a choice to go smaller first. As I said, our information is coming from the knowledge base during inference time, so we don't need to memorize everything in the model itself.
Excellent, thank you. And then, so the questions, so if we had people that were asking questions that may be of a sensitive nature, are the questions themselves like a fire and forget system, or are those questions that we're asking stored somewhere? And then if so, how does that data privacy or security work?
Right. That's an excellent question. So for our current public demo, we store them for debugging purpose, but it can be, the whole stack can be deployed to an air-gapped cluster where the data will stay with the customer. And that's the whole pitch, that in a sensitive environment, you will not lose control of your prompt or question.
Roger that. Thank you so much for answering those questions. Fantastic job.
Okay, Fareed, if you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Real quick, Mike or Shah. Would it be a reasonable prompt to, I'm assuming you have some small scenarios. If you feed that textual scenario to it, would it be a reasonable prompt to say, generate an MSDL for this?
Yeah, so yeah, you can generate measles. So right now we don't have it like in measle chart format, but yeah, you can generate measles. I think. Yeah.
Nice.
At least if we can't, I'll have to double check that. If we can't do it right now, that's the intent, because measles are time intensive to create as well. So
it would seem if you can create an S-copy to PMISI matrix, you should be able to create measles, right? The new thing that's added is a temporal component, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't talking about injects. I was asking really a scenario output in MSDL. Military scenario definition.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said MSEL. Sorry, say that again, Fareed.
There's a standard called military scenario definition language. It's an XML-based capability. It just basically lets you, one of the capabilities is it lets you express a scenario in that language. And I was just wondering if you feed it as a prompt, you have a small scenario, or whatever you want, whatever you have as a textual thing, and say, take this and spit out my MSDL for this. Can it do that?
Got it. Shah, I'll let you take that one. I mean, we don't have that functionality right now, but it's something it sounds like we could do.
Yeah, we have to check. So one way to tackle is that having a bunch of MSDL files in our training set, and then we can teach the model to spit out the same format. Right now we don't have it. I can check and maybe run some experiment and get back to you.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of like ontological learning, right? The two things that you learn when you're trying to learn the knowledge base of something else based on its ontology are you learn the semantics of what everything means, and then you learn the structure of how things are related, how to go together. So studying, if your learning system were to study a bunch of MSDL files, it would in essence be learning the structure of a language to output in, right? And then the semantics would be things that it would get from the knowledge base. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would think it knows probably about MSDL already, because if you picked up something that's general large language model based on a corpus that's on the internet, or whatever it came with, it would know something about that to begin with, right?
Yes, could be. Very much.
So if you have a small scenario, a tiny scenario, like, I don't know, anti-submarine warfare does this, or search and rescue, or whatever you might have, advanced to a particular zone, you feed that in textual and say, give me back this in MSDL.
Yeah, could be possible, as you said, that it may have already picked up. We don't have full control in terms of what went in the pre-training training set. So that's why I need to test.
Yeah,
but I think
it's always we're taking notes here, so it's always good and helpful to have to be learning things here. So thank you for that.
Tracy, I think you had your hand up.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. So I work in manufacturing, and my curiosity here is, can this system be utilized to analyze supply chain issues, customer versus supplier, shipping schedules, and choke or fail points?
The short answer, Tracy, is that's something that we have not looked into yet, but it's honestly on our list. There's a lot to look into as far as like contested logistics operations and operating and setting up bases in austere and remote environments, and how do you set things up quickly, what's going on with the supply chains, what's up with maintenance. So the logistics area is very large, and we just haven't given it that amount of thought yet, but it is something that we want to.
Oh yeah, because Because a lot of people in manufacturing realized they were working in just in time for the past decade, and it all went downhill when COVID hit.
Mhm.
So it's just something
Yeah.
that I thought it could be used for.
It's huge, especially when you're thinking about, like, island and basin operations, right? And you're setting things up quickly and you're tearing things down quickly, and you're thinking about resupplies, and you're thinking about manufacturing for, whatever you need to set things up or tear things down. So definitely something top of mind for us, and definitely something we want to explore more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We only have a couple more minutes left. I mean, this has been awesome. So, like, thank you so much for the opportunity here. We can take questions for the last couple minutes. Tracy, is that a new hand or old hand?
Sorry, just haven't taken it down.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it automatically took them down, but sometimes I guess not. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much. I mean, every time we show this off and people use it, we learn a lot of new things, and obviously there's a lot to do and a lot to work on, and building that trust layer is super important to us. So, the technology is new, so we're excited to get it out in front of people, and obviously happy to continue the discussion with anybody that wants to, and we can follow up with any specific questions or help anybody in any way that we can support what you're working on. Just keep us posted.
So, Mike, I'm going to go ahead, and I know I'm going to pre-anticipate this question. People will be asking me if I have access to your slides or any materials. If you guys have anything that you're happy to share, PDFs or whatever, if you send them to me, I can forward them to everybody who gave me their email address for the session today. Or equally, I could just share your email addresses with them, and likewise, I'll give you the addresses of everybody who is here in case you need to follow up.
Yeah, that's perfect, Chuck. We're happy. I can just send you the deck that we used today. And I just put mine and Shah's emails in the chat, so anybody feel free to reach out at any point with any questions or comments or feedback or concerns or whatever. And I know I tried to email, I think, the whole group yesterday in response to some of the feedback, but I don't think it just bounced back to me. So I'll just send it to you, Chuck.
Okay, great, thanks. And for everybody else, let me go ahead and share this one last time. For anybody, first, thanks so much to our speakers, Mike and Shah. Thank you so much. This is very informative and very interesting. So definitely excited about today's topic. For those of you who may have attended for the first time, if you want to stay involved, you'll get this information in your email. You can email me if you're interested in joining our study group, or at least getting on the email reflector for it. And there's a little bit about our parent organization, SISO. You can go there, create a free account, and then track down our study group and join it. There's a whole bunch of other interesting related study groups for LVC topics, training, simulation for manufacturing, wargaming, all kinds of stuff. And then finally, not at all to detract from the excellent conversation today, but we have another special session coming up in about a month. Sebastian Bay, anybody who's related to wargaming may have heard of Sebastian Bay recently. Mike, like you, he's also a former Marine, or a Marine in holding, I guess. And he's going to be talking about Littoral Commander, which is his tabletop war game that's getting a lot of play these days. And one of the topics he's going to talk about is that is being digitized. It's being turned into a computer game. And he's going to talk about his thoughts about digital wargaming and the process of going from tabletop to digital and those kinds of things. So that's just to let you know. It'll be advertised in all the same usual spaces that today's session was advertised. So be on the lookout for that. Again, thanks to our guest speakers. And anybody else, last round for questions. If not, I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug. All right. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it. Great session. And you'll be getting an email from me with a link of where the video is and some of the details about who attended today and some other things. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Thank
Bye.
you.
Everyone.